welcome everybody to a brand new spoiler review here of Star Trek Strange New Worlds Season 2, Episode 3 from the
Geek
Buddies.
Hey! Gotta get a little different flavor since McClungus isn't here.
That's right. McClung's not joining us for these. He's not the biggest Star Trek fan, but we are going to hold down.
That's because Star Trek is an intelligent man sci-fi.
Oh, how dare you? How dare you?
I said it. I said what I said.
The man. I said what I said. Well, today we are jumping into what I think is going to be, Michael, one of the most controversial episodes. And I'm saying this ahead of time because we're recording this ahead of time. We're lucky that we got to get the first 6 episodes early. So we're recording some of these reviews earlier than they would normally come out. So we don't know how people are going to react. But my assumption is that this one is going to be one that people are going to battle about online. And I think that's on purpose here. This one's written by David Reed here. It's directed by Amanda Rowe, and it is called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow, which is, of course, is an allusion to Macbeth's speech. I think it's Act 5, Scene 5, after he finds out that Lady Macbeth has died, and he delivers this.
Mr. Shakespeare knows so much.
Say, we know Shakespeare and Star Trek go hand in hand. But yes, this is an 11-line soliloquy where he talks about the futility of life. And certainly, Mike, you can make that connection here in this particular episode. This is a very heavy Leanne Noonien Singh episode, along with Kirk, a two-hander here, going at it, the Tango and Cash of the Star Trek universe. But one of them dies, and that's Kirk. We get to watch Kirk die again in this world, which is really fascinating to consider, and have a relationship, at least for a brief moment, like the soliloquy talks about, a brief time, a moment of time here, and have that affect Leanne, that by the end, she is devastated by the loss of Kirk, but also what she's had to do in order to save this universe and had to sacrifice in order to not remove that scarlet letter from her name. So this was a very intense, exciting, fun Star Trek that evoked Star Trek 4, evoked those great old school Star Trek episodes when they go back in time with Joan Collins and what have you, and also pushed the narrative forward of the season. And yet again, Mike, no Anson Mount till the end of the damn show. This is an incredible contract that Anson Mount has signed for himself in this season. So what are your overall thoughts here before we dive in deep in the specificity of this episode here from Star Trek Strange New Worlds?
I'm trying to think of this. So look, because I think if you've been listening to our Star Trek reviews, and we really, we went through all of season 3 of Picard. We did a lot of Star Trek love. And I don't want to become just like the guy who just loves everything that they're doing in Star Trek, but
Sure.
I am currently the guy that's loving everything they're doing on Star Trek. I don't love them getting rid of Star Trek Prodigy and not doing season 2, but that's a bigger issue. But look, this is maybe one of the best standalone episodes of TV I've seen in a while. Not just Star Trek. It's a great, this was running, it comes in at 60 minutes, like a full 60-minute episode. And this is basically a truncated, awesome feature film.
Yes.
I mean, this is the full thing. And it does all the things that you want. Here's what I'll say. As good as Star Trek Picard season 3 was.
Yeah.
Star Trek Picard season 2 was a hot mess.
Yeah.
And they did the whole, hey, people love Star Trek 4, the time travel stuff. Let's do the whole fun go back in time thing. And they had an entire season to do it. And they just dropped the ball every episode. Yeah. And this did everything right in one episode that season 2 of Picard did not do in an entire season. It was that good. Also, we spoke last week, and the first episode out of the gate with season 2, I thought was fine. I thought they introduced, Carol Kane came in, they introduced some good ideas, but it wasn't knocking me out of the water.
Right.
As we talked about with episode 2, that was a very targeted, it's Star Trek legal drama in space, but they really hit that thing that sci-fi does well, where they're like, we're going to give you a bunch of social issues, but we're going to do the sci-fi bent on it. But even last week I said with La'an, and the whole kind of her dealing with the fact that she's an augment and her dealing with her past with Khan, I was excited to see that even though that was kind of its own standalone episode, how that was going to continue throughout the season. And they came out of the gate in the very next episode and really nailed it. So they nailed the time travel. They gave us just this really compelling story. Is it Paul Wesley who plays Kirk?
Yes. Yeah.
The two of them had insane chemistry. They were killing it together.
Yeah.
I mean, it was just this perfectly crafted hour of television. And just like last week, where they were really getting into the eugenics wars and how that led to these laws against augments and genetic engineering. And they were really getting into the con of it all. Well, they really got into the con of it all in this episode. And I think that's why you're saying this is going to be controversial. But look, I think this was great. It was just great.
Yeah. I mean, you're following up the eugenics war conversation and argument that echoed into last episode, right? And then you're following it up with this because we had seen how Leanne was struggling with her heritage and wanting to break rules to help her mentor there in Una. So we saw that she was willing to break these rules, willing to do these things because she's struggling with this last name. And we see that this carries into this episode, and she is doing her mundane security things. But M'Benga is the one, Dr. M'Benga, who says you can't carry this by yourself. You've got to let other people in. And by the end of the episode, she has let someone in, and he has died on her. So in essence, you've even hardened her heart possibly even more from ever coming out of the shell. If the one time she's finally worked to the point that she can come out of her shell, she glimpses this possibility and it is taken away from her. So it's very interesting how they're constructing this character here of Leanne and what they're giving her to overcome and confront and deal with as we go further and further into the season. And will she snap? Will she turn? Will all the pain and the sadness and all of it break her? Or will it make her stronger so that when in the future she becomes a captain, she is equipped with all of these experiences to draw from when she's confronted with obstacles or challenges? So I love this. And as you mentioned Paul Wesley, Christina Chong deserves so much credit for what she did in this episode. Really brought her talent and her abilities as an actress to the forefront here throughout this entire. She's driving the narrative and the story. And in essence, Mike, if you want to use that tomorrow title, she is Macbeth in that she has handed this vision, which is the holographic image of that thing that the guy hands her. And that's what motivates her to go carry on this thing. Now, Macbeth's was more malevolent because he wanted to be king at any cost. Hers is trying to save the galaxy, save the universe. And like that temporal person from the temporal authority tells her at the end, I didn't make you go do this. You wanted to go do this. And just like Macbeth losing Lady Macbeth, she loses Kirk and she's despondent by the end. So there's a lot here that you can make a connection to that I enjoy. Yeah.
And just listening to you talk about this, it made me realize, so here's a big difference with what Strange New World is doing structurally than what a lot of the other Star Trek is doing right now. And I think it's important because I think it's what makes Strange New World stand out, which is there's two different ways when you're kind of building. I mean, there's lots of ways, but there's two big ways you can build a story for the season. And when you're doing these big arcs, you can do a plot-driven storyline, or you can do a character-driven storyline. So, plot-driven storyline, you can see it everywhere. Star Trek Discovery, there was a giant explosion that wiped out all warp cores, and we have to figure out what did it before it does it again.
Right.
And then there's a bunch of character stuff that happens between characters as they are trying to solve this overarching thing. Even Picard, which had such great character moments throughout, what drove that story was, why are these people hunting them? What does, it's all about the bigger threat to the universe, threat to the galaxy, threat to the Federation. There's a big thing and we're trying to solve this thing and there's a mystery. Strange New World, we're 3 episodes into the season. There's no bigger. There isn't, like, the thing that connects episodes 1 to episode 2 to episode 3 is not, well, there's this bigger thing. There might be things. There's obviously plot happening, but what is driving us through these episodes is the characters.
Yeah.
So the first episode, we're like, okay, this is Spock. He's stepping into the captain's chair and he's a little bit uncomfortable, but he's gonna do what's right, even though it might not be logical because he's a little bit human, a little bit Vulcan.
Yeah.
Episode 2, all about Una. All about her life as an augment, all about why she still wanted to join the Federation, all about why this was important to her and who she is as a person and her relationship with Nira. And now you get into episode 3 and we just dive deep in La'an. And yes, the episode in this contained sense is we need to reset the timeline, but that's not a season arc. That's just a plot for this episode that allows us to have La'an face literally the reason that she has this scarlet letter on her chest and make a decision about it. It's all character stuff.
Yeah.
And because Strange New World is kind of doing more of these classic Star Trek sci-fi situation of the week, it's allowing you to just dive really, really deep in characters. And I think in this episode, they really showed that to its absolute best advantage, not just with her, but with Kirk as well. Like, this is the most, Paul Wesley came in at the end of season 1 and we had another really great episode with him that was another kind of like alternate reality kind of situation. Yeah. But with this one, I think we really got to see just how good and charming and smart and just, he was given some serious Kirk can sleep with whoever he wants vibes.
Yeah.
In all the right ways for me. Personally.
No, that's fair. And listen, for me looking at it, I didn't 100%. I wasn't 100% on the Paul Wesley train for Kirk. I was with Chris Pine 100%. But then but Paul, I was like, I don't know. This episode, you saw that he was doing his version of that Shatner, Chris Pine Kirk. But it came organically through who he is as an actor, and you saw the moments where he was evoking Kirk, he was evoking the patterns, he was evoking that stuff that from the original William Shatner performance, and I thought that worked so well. And like you said, his smoothness is not overt or aggressive; it just is. And so you saw her sneak the looks at him, getting dressed, look at him while he's sleeping, and have them, and then he's the one that goes in for the kiss when they're going on the walk. And I thought that was really interesting to see a Kirk in this way. And then having him die again, for those of us who hate watching Kirk die, it was really the perfect situation and way that Kirk would die by taking a risk, because Kirk always takes risks that Sara, the Romulan, wouldn't shoot him. And she did. So it was like, wow. And, this idea of dying around a Khan, or around a Noonien Singh, rather, which is, of course, what happens in the J.J. Abrams storyline or timeline, for example. So very interesting stuff for sure.
But I mean, you bring up the J.J. Abrams. I mean, look, I love the first Star Trek, the first J.J. Abrams Star Trek.
Me too.
I think Into Darkness is a decent movie, but I don't think it's a great Khan movie. Like, I think it's fine and it has some great moments, but I don't think that Benedict Cumberbatch, who is, I think, an amazing actor, but I think that the way they got into the Khan of it all didn't really do it for me.
Right.
And I, in my mind, was like, look, maybe it's Ricardo Montalban. I can't get past that. That's so iconic. But what they're giving me between the La'an storyline and then seeing this very young Khan at the beginning of the eugenics war and everything they're doing, like they could just keep going on this whole train. And I think that they could build to some kind of Khan story. Look, I know they can't really, because we're sort of contained within this is the 5-year journey of this Enterprise before we get to the Enterprise we know, but they are really going for it and it's working for me.
Yeah, well, let's talk about, normally we go beat by beat, but I think this is more about, like, it's pretty simple to break it into its elements, and then I think we should have discussion about the elements of it all. Okay. What do you think of the story of this particular episode here, Mike? We've got her getting this mission in her mind that she has to go and handle this thing. This guy in a suit comes out. She's clearly dealing with stuff from the second episode that we just saw. It's still in her head. She's doing the security stuff, the mundane stuff. Nice little plant with Pelia and that painting from the Louvre, her place in Vermont. Nice little plant there that seems like a throwaway, but pays dividends later in the show. But we see her go. She's going through these things. Has the training with Mabenga telling her, as I said, she has to let this stuff go or let people in. Then this mission comes to her from this dude who's been shot, and he's in a gray suit, and he's got this hologram. She takes it, and then something flashes as soon as she hits that button on the thing, and she goes to the bridge, and it's Kirk. And then her and Kirk have a meeting. They're wrestling over this thing. Boom. They go to the mid 21st century. He thinks it's New York. She knows it's Toronto. And then they go on this mission to figure out what is happening. They find out that someone is causing these explosions, this terrorism stuff, to stop human beings from going into space. It seems like conspiracy stuff, but it's actually happening. And then we find out that this person who was taking pictures of the wreckage is actually a Romulan, a time traveler in disguise who wants to kill Khan, who's been waiting there for 30 years to kill Khan, so that humanity never achieves or goes out into the skies, never creates the Federation, because in this timeline, there is no Starfleet, never does any of this stuff, and she wants to kill Khan. And it's Leanne, of all people, who's been struggling with her last name, Milan, who stops her and kills her, has to watches Kirk die in front of her, and then in the end has the opportunity to kill Khan, but does not do it. And it's, of course, brings back that, evokes that the conversation, would you go back in time and kill Hitler if you could? But also there's this discussion about how Kirk is like, look, we're fine how we are. I can't help you Vulcans. I got to do what I got to do for me. So it's basically the isolationist theory versus the globalist theory. She is about globalism. He is about isolationism. And they have that discussion in battle as well throughout this. And in the end, she's the one that sacrifices so much to be able to allow Khan to do what he does, doom these people to genocide, so that in the end, we create the Federation and create this a Starfleet that helps to bring peace to the galaxy. So it's an incredible sacrifice. And the fact that it all comes back to Leanne, I think some Star Trek hardcore people are going to lose their minds. But what did you think about how integral the Noonien Singh family is to the construction of all this stuff that we've come to love about Star Trek?
Well, when they first announced the cast of Strange New Worlds, and we knew that there was a Noonien Singh, I mean, that's like that's like a giant whistle to what? Whoa, what are you doing? But and in season 1, they didn't do that much with it. But I really love what they're doing with it now, and by doing it in this sort of alternate reality way, they're doing a smart job, at least thus far, of in a squint test, I can say, yeah, this doesn't affect my timeline. Like nothing about this. This doesn't affect the original series. This doesn't affect Wrath of Khan. Like, this is all okay. I get it. But yeah, you're right. I mean, I think that a lot of the origins of this idea came from if you could go back in time, would you kill Hitler?
Yeah.
And what this says is you could do that. Things might get worse.
Yeah.
And it's the classic, we don't fuck with time because you don't know what will happen. Like, that
we just saw it in the Flash.
Which is really what Flashpoint is what Flash is all about. But yeah, I mean, they even say in this thing that like, maybe it was the eugenics war. Maybe it was going through this harrowing period of our history that brought us together and made us ready to embrace the bigger galaxy when the Vulcans showed up. So you just never know what's going to happen. So it's an interesting moral dilemma that we just get to see played out with these characters that we know very well if we love Star Trek. But yeah, to your point about the storytelling, this was just tight storytelling. We start with a couple really brief bits of just seeing where La'an's at, and M'Benga kind of saying for us, hey, you dealing with some shit.
Yeah.
What are you dealing with? And yes, the Pelia plant was a great plant because I didn't know it was a plant.
Yeah, I know.
Like,
you're like,
when you're just like, okay, I get it. We're seeing that La'an's dealing with stuff, and Pelia is a weirdo, and she has a bunch of this stuff, and Carol Kane is Carol Caning all over the bridge, and I love it. Very funny. And you just don't even think about, oh, this painting is from the Louvre, and you lived in Vermont. Great, cool. Yeah. You don't even like. There's a lot of times that we all see movies and TV shows where somebody says something, and you go, okay, well, that's coming back later. Obviously, that's coming back later.
They're hanging a lamp on that.
Didn't see it at all. Get into the action right away. Get to the other Enterprise right away. See Kirk. Understand things are going bad, and then you instantly go. And like, even as you were going through the episode and explaining what happened, when you really get to the plot of it, it's pretty simple. It's deceptively simple. It doesn't feel simple when you're watching it. It feels really full, but it's like, we go back in time. We got to find something. We don't know what it is. A bridge explodes. Oh, that's it.
Right.
Like that happened, but let's see where we go from here. Figure out that there's some people to chase them down, get some information, go to the place, Kirk is shot. Like, that's what happens, really.
Yeah.
Why it feels so full is because they took so much time for character stuff.
Yeah.
So, like, by having them show up and not know what the fuck to do,
Right.
the plot kind of stops. Like, they don't know where to go. You're back in time, and we have no idea what to do. So, what do? You go get clothes. You get the entire thing where Kirk has never seen a revolving door. They don't have money. You got to do the money thing. Well, what are we going to do? We're going to freeze to death. The whole Kirk decides to play chess in the park. And Kirk is actually really good at chess. Like it's all character stuff.
Right.
And that's great because it really gives you the time with these two to just sort of bounce off of each other. And they are just doing a great job. Like, we know, and this is what I think is great. This is where I will say, one thing that I think I like a little bit more about Paul Wesley's Kirk than Chris Pine's Kirk is that and this isn't Chris Pine's fault. This is just the writing. But in J.J. Abrams' Star Trek, when we get to Starfleet, Kirk is, sleeping with Uhura's green roommate and he's hiding under the bed and he's doing the Kirk thing. Like, we know that Kirk sleeps around and slept with half the galaxy. So we're seeing Kirk sleep with the roommate and he's kind of, doing his sex thing. And like, that's great. And it's very funny.
Yes.
This Kirk is so suave and charming and sweet. Like, this is the Kirk that you are like, I would sleep with you. I don't care who else you slept with. I'll sleep with you right now. Like, this one is laying on the charm, not just the goofy kind of sexy thing. Like, I'm like, oh, this is hot. And like and it's just really smart time travel stuff.
Yeah.
How do we get the money? How do we do this? How do we do that? Like, it really kind of like makes sense. And then right when we're sort of like, okay, this is all fun. Where are we going? You have a giant explosion. So, okay, now I'm interested again. And then when you meet Sara, I believe is Sara, the Romulan. That's a whole fun bit where you're like, okay, well, this is a person that's giving us information and helping us get on the trail. But, she's right about some stuff. And we learn, okay, that is a Romulan ship. Like, it gives us plot information. So again, I didn't see it coming that she was going to be the bad guy.
Right.
I was like, oh, that's a fun character. Cool. Didn't really see it. Some of you guys right now are like, Vogel's a fucking idiot. I saw it from a mile away. Maybe you did. I was still in love with Kirk. I don't know what to tell you.
I'm in the boat with Mikey. I didn't see it coming at all. Yeah.
And you make time for a great car chase, which in a car that I believe is the same car from the beginning of J.J. Abrams' Star Trek.
I was going to say,
it's a Corvette, right? Like, it's the same Corvette.
Yeah.
So we got a nice little nod, Easter egg to to Kirk in that Star Trek.
Yeah.
But so you just get all of this really wonderful character stuff, and it's particularly important because, and they make a really fine point of this, like, La'an has never met anybody who had no idea who she was. Like,
right.
She literally, for all intents and purposes, her last name, if she was in the real world, would be La'an Hitler.
Right.
Like, that's what she's carrying with her.
Sure.
And everybody who meets her is like, oh,
right.
Noonien Singh. So no wonder she's always got her guard up. But now there's this guy who is like super charming, really smart, fun to be going on an adventure with, and has no idea who she is.
Yeah.
Like, so you get why she's going to let her guard down. It doesn't feel forced that she all of a sudden meets this guy and within like a couple days is like, yeah, I really, really like you a lot. So I thought that was really smart. And then I also really quick just thought the entire debate that they had about their two, like, you're right. There is sort of a globalization versus isolation kind of thing, but more to the point. And there's so many times where you do this type of story where you're the main character and you're like, I have to save my reality. And the other person is like, you're right. We do have to save your reality. This reality is garbage. And like, I think this is way more honest.
Yeah.
Like, I think there's some shit going on in America is really pissing me off right now. And if somebody showed up from another reality and said, oh, Trump was never president for us. We have this, and everybody gets free cotton candy. I'm not going to go like, oh, cotton candy sounds great. Let me abandon all my friends and let everything I know disappear. So the fact that Kirk is like, no, I'm going to sit here and drink out of the mini bar and keep my reality. Thank you so much for playing.
Right.
Like, is actually a more honest reaction. And what I love, and to your point, like, everything she says about, we have gone off into the stars, we are friends with the Vulcans. He's like, I don't care.
Yeah.
And then when she says, you could be an explorer, you see him sort of be like, okay, that's something about that got me, but I'm still not on board. It's not until he finds out his brother is alive in the other reality.
Right.
So again, he's not making some sweeping moral statement on I believe that we should all be together, so I'm going to sacrifice. He's like, I will die so my brother can live. It is completely personal. Right. So it's all character based. So yeah, everything that they did, even the fun little journey to Vermont to see Pelia, like very funny. More Carol Kane, please.
Please. Yes.
Like she was great. Yeah. And it was a very smart plot device to get us where we needed to go. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, like this was a masterclass in here's how you tell a tight hour mini movie.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about the relationship with Kirk and Leanne, but you kind of naturally went there. So I'm going to give my 2 cents on that. Yeah, I really love the chemistry between them. I texted you halfway through the episode and I was like, I want to see a rom-com with these two, not knowing how it was going to end, not knowing they were actually going to kiss, but you could sense that things were happening. And certainly Leanne was the first one who kind of is entertaining that possibility when she sneaks that look at him before she turns away when he's getting dressed there in the dressing room. They both commit petty crimes. So, okay, interesting. But I like that there's an element of that. I like the conversation about the hot dogs, the conversation about the sunset, right? Because we find out that he was born on the USS Iowa in space, not in Iowa on Earth, as the actual Kirk in her timeline is born. And then we find out, of course, that his brother's alive. And what that means, they have fun banter about his middle name, Tiberius, which is a meta thing because so many people talk about that middle name of James T. Kirk's. And so there was so much that they explored here. And the progression of the relationship made sense. It was natural because these two were fantastic in their acting and in their chemistry and their performances to make it believable. So when that kiss happens, it makes sense. It makes 100% sense. Them battling over philosophies makes sense. Yeah, exactly. I agree. But that happens sometimes. You meet somebody, and in 1 day or 2 days, if you spend a lot of time with each other, that you get caught up in the fact that there's this, because you're showing the best parts of yourself. And so you get caught up in what could be. And so her letting her guard down, I thought was a nice new layer to add to Leanne Noonien Singh, right? I thought it was really fun to see that from her. And Christina Chong, again, just doing wonderful work here, playing the multiple levels as this relationship progresses, and Paul Wesley as well. So that when the situation with Sara happens and we get this conversation with her, and we'll get to Sara in a second, and then at the end of what happens when she shoots Kirk, we are so invested in this relationship by that time that although they've only been together for 20 to 30 minutes of the episode, we feel his death so powerfully, and her reaction to his death all the way to the last seconds of the episode when she collapses on the bed, essentially sobbing after she reaches out to the Kirk in her timeline, and the watch that she still has that they both came together to find that cold fusion reactor with is there in the foreground in focus while she is out of focus. So just fantastic stuff in terms of character and the moments that they built the natural moments that they built this relationship. Like you said, Michael, the key was it wasn't forced because he doesn't know who she is. So it seemed believable that she would let her guard down with someone like Kirk. So I thought that was fantastic for sure. Go ahead.
Just really quickly. I mean, because like on both sides, you're right. Like you get why she lets her guard down to him. And I think because she's such a strong character, you get from what we know of Kirk, having this woman who just doesn't back down, is busting balls as well as she can. Like the banter between them was so natural and so much fun that you don't question. You didn't say, oh well, I don't know why those two fell for each other. You're like, no, I will kiss them both.
Well, I'll go halfway with you on that. Let's take a quick break, and we'll jump into a little bit more of the episode right after this.
Nope, that's Next Generation. I don't know. I got it.
That's Next Generation.
That's all I got in my head.
Well, what did you think? Let's move on to Sara here. This Romulan here. Initially, when she shows up, she's taking pictures. We see the photonic torpedo. Noonien Singh is a little rough with her, and Kirk has to kind of smooth things. for this. They can look at the pictures. They notice these things. And then Kirk is the one that gets pulled over eventually when he's doing this car chase, chasing the black van, as you said, so cleverly evoking J.J. Abrams' Star Trek from 2009. And Sarah's there to talk the cops out of arresting him, which of course is really interesting because we know nowadays citizen journalism. We know people pull out their phones to video cops. So it's a really interesting moment there that evokes what we've got going in our world, eventually talks them out of it. And then she has food with them, tells them about this idea that she has that, this is all the stuff that's happening on Earth is to keep humanity from going to space. And she seems like one of these nutty conspiracy people, but she seems like she's got a good heart. And even Noonien Singh is like, look, she's unstable. We can trust her, but she's unstable. Even though Kirk wants to give her a little more credit, she ends up saying this really sweet thing to them, like, thanks for taking me seriously and not calling me crazy. You don't know how much this means to me. And so we're invested. We're like, okay, maybe it seems weird that they're okay with a conspiracy person, but she seems like a nice person. We're on board. And then when they get to the Noonien Singh Institute, when they figured out the cold fusion stuff, she's right there with a gun. And we find out she's a Romulan who's been the one doing all these terrorist things for the last 30 years because she's been trying to get to Khan. And then she kills Kirk, fights off Noonien Singh initially, kills a bunch of security guards at Institute, gets to the door of Khan, which is a hell of a reveal. And then in the end, Leanne is the one that turns it around, fights her off, and then eventually kills her. So, and she disappears herself or whatever at the end there. So what did you think of Sarah's role in this episode, coming in later, as late as she did in the episode, but still having a profound effect on this episode?
So yeah, so like break it down to when we first see her and we just use her to like get a close up of the explosion.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, so extra. She's an extra. Then when she shows up after the car chase, I was like, well, that's weird. Like, that's weird. Like,
Yeah.
Like definitely like my spidey sense tingled. But kind of to your point, we went right into this. Oh, she's a nut. She's an alien nut. Like she's a conspiracy theorist, whatever.
Right.
And so then I really thought, oh, well, they just got this actress and we're having this really, like, she's having a lot of fun with this role. And this is all exposition.
Yeah.
This is how we learned that the Romulans were here. This is how we learned certain bits of information, the cold fusion thing. Like, she's a plot device. She's exposition, and then we get rid of her. Yeah. And they even kind of, to your point about them kind of being okay with a conspiracy nut.
Yeah.
Like, they make a good point. Like, you know,
Right.
to them, from where they live, the person running around saying there's aliens out there and
right.
like, she's right. And so I think it's even Kirk says it. He's like, La'an is like, she's unstable. And he's like, yeah, but think how isolating it must be to be running around and telling everybody something and nobody believes you. And like, you're closer to right than you think you are.
Yeah.
So I was like, oh, okay, cool. Plot exposition, interesting commentary on alien nuts. Let's move on. So
also,
then when
also a quick what do you call it? A quick putting you on the wrong path with this mysterious guy who's been showing up at these things, and you think that's the real villain, not her. So great.
Oh yeah, totally. Oh, I didn't even think about that. You're right, totally. So then you got all that, and then you get to the Noonien Singh Institute, and she shows up with the gun, and I'm like, at first I was like, oh, she's really crazy and she's going to cause a problem. And then when it's like, oh no, she's a Romulan, I was like, oh, well, shit, I did not see that. That was not in my bingo card. But I think it's really interesting. And it introduces this idea as this whole Federation temporal group. Later on, this idea that there are entire groups of people in the future that are battling over timelines. So in that way, we're getting into a little bit of Marvel, Kang, like TVA. That type of stuff. Like, the TVA, like we're kind of stepping into that toward it. So it is interesting that just culturally between Flashpoint and the multiverse in Marvel and Everything Everywhere All at Once, and now Star Trek, not that Star Trek didn't do alternate realities before and across the spider, like every comic book and sci-fi and fantasy thing, we've all dealt with this idea before, but not in the mass sort of commercial, everybody understands this way. And so introducing this aspect into Star Trek and this idea that we can return to, that in the future, the Federation has an entire group devoted to dealing with timelines, and that the Romulans are all up in everybody's business, going back in time, trying to cause all kinds of problems. It's a big idea that could either like reap dividends for Star Trek or just be a complete mess of storytelling. So it's an interesting thing to, like, once you pull this genie out of the box, it's a big genie, but I think that it's interesting, and I really did enjoy it with this one particular character with Sara. Like, I mean, and just like all of it was just good writing. It's like when she was like, yeah, still getting used to the ears, but like she just got it. She did a really nice 180. It was a great performance on her part.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't have her name because it's not in the cast list as we're recording this review, but shout out to that actress. She did a wonderful job. Fit right in, was totally believable. And when the switch happened, her acting from what you thought was someone you could feel sorry for to someone you were scared of or intimidated by, I thought was a nice switch for sure. What about this moment here at the end or near the end with Lon and Khan? I mean, seeing that name right there in front of the door. I mean, I screamed. The Lady Owl had to come in and was like, what's going on with you? And I'm like, it's Khan. And just my natural impulse when Khan shows up in anything. And so I had a fear. I had a worry here because I was like, oh my God, if you mess with, and I know it's an alternate timeline. I get it. It's not the main timeline. It's an alt, but still you're messing with stuff and you're trying to line up these timelines. So I was like, what is happening here? So when she walks in and the door's opened and Sara dies there, we see this young kid pop up, and he is the appropriate ethnicity for Khan, which I thought was a nice choice. And then having this moment where he says, are you going to kill me? And she says, no. And they have this back and forth in this conversation. And she leaves him with this one line. I want to find it here. What was it? Oh yeah. That you are right where you need to be, even though you may not understand what I'm saying. So what a thing to say, that you are right where you need to be. So in that moment, she is understanding that she must let Khan live so that all these terrible things can happen, but it'll lead to, in the end, to a much more positive result. So it's a hell of a thing to put on Lon, but I thought that scene worked so well to lead us into the scene with the temporal investigator. And then of course her calling Kirk, which was so bittersweet.
We'll talk that. We'll get to that in a minute.
So
rough.
Take me through all that. Yeah.
But no, I think that this is what the episode's about. This is what her character's about. Like, I am, we learned in the last episode in her conversation with Nira, like, she is tore up about her lineage, about the fact that she's inherited some of that augmented genetics from Khan, and that has made her really ashamed of who she is to a degree, and that she's carried around this scarlet letter of a last name her entire life that carries such a burden. And so when this was the one moment, it was the right moment, but it didn't fully land, when Sara says to her, if you just you're holding this device, you don't have to obey any rules. You can kill him and go live any life you want.
Right.
I know that that's what the offer needs to be. We obviously know she's not going to do it, but that is the temptation. Is that she goes into this room at the end, and here's this kid. This kid is it. Like, she has a chance right here. Stop the eugenics war. So eugenics war never happens. Right. But she now fully understands the cause and effect of everything. And she now understands that as bad as this all was, the world she has now is what it is because of it. You can't, and seeing Kirk's world and seeing how things could potentially be worse, and just understanding the bigger picture of it all puts you in that position of, when she says to him, you're exactly where you need to be. Yes, that's saying you don't understand this, but you've got to go live your life, the good, the bad, the ugly, so that the world can be what it's going to be. But it's also her accepting who she is in a way. And kind of putting that part to rest, saying, look, it is what it is. This is who I am. And when I had an opportunity to change it, like, I wouldn't actually change the rest of the world.
Right.
It's not worth it for me. So I'm going to live with what I am and who I am.
Some people And I love this. Some characters, Mike, have to carry the weight, right? And Mbenga at the beginning is like, oh, you got to let people in. You got to, you don't have to carry it alone. But some people, unfortunately, in our world have to carry the weight. Some people have much more pain to navigate in their worlds than other people. And it's an unfortunate situation. So how do you do that? And I think Leon is, in a way, a tragic figure, even though she's a strong figure. She's a tragic figure in the way, because here is a perfect opportunity for her to end this whole thing. And she doesn't, because in essence, she would probably end herself, because then Khan doesn't go on and, have a child that has a child that becomes her. So there's these decisions that she makes, but she carries the weight. And when we see that woman show up from the Department of Temporal Investigations, they didn't write her name down, but her saying that you can't tell anybody. You literally cannot tell anybody. And the only other person you could have talked to about it died in your arms. So this is it. You must now carry the weight of this as well going forward. And so it's incredible. There's that line, was it great power comes great responsibility? And then also some shoulders just have to carry more weight than others. And certainly with Leanne, by the end, there's even more that she has to carry. What did you think of the Department of Temporal Investigation showing up and her reaching out to Kirk in her timeline for the first time, meeting for him for the first time ever, by the way, and then having her breakdown that she does at the end, which was so heartbreaking to see?
Well, so like I said, I think the idea of the Federation having a, what is it called? The Temporal
Department of Temporal Investigations.
There, the Federation having a Department of Temporal Investigation is a really interesting idea that opens up. I mean, basically, it's the TVA,
right?
I mean, it's the TVA. Like that's what it is.
And once it's the world within worlds that you have in Star Wars, where you can jump into any other timeline and change things.
And so once you introduce that, all I'll say is don't overuse it.
Yes, 100%.
Just don't overuse it. Don't make this whole season about the Department of Temporal Investigation, or if you do, you better really stick that fucking landing. But, so yeah, that's like, just like, those are those ideas. You're like, that's cool. Don't overuse it. And there, like, in every Star Trek, Star Wars, Marvel, like everyone is guilty once in a while of, you had that thing that you did and people are like, that's really cool. And then like a year and a half later, you're like, please no more. I don't need it anymore. Please stop. So that this could be that, but it's an interesting idea. Like, time travel is interesting. Time travel is also a completely horrible storytelling device, because it is impossible to do without it becoming paradoxical. So it is just a nightmare of storytelling. But when you get a really good time travel story, it's really good. And an alternate realities and multiverses. So I think that's interesting. I think the most important thing from a character standpoint to come out of this is you can't speak about this to anyone.
Yeah.
Because to your point, the very beginning of this episode is Dr. Mbenga saying, you got to let people in.
Yeah.
And then you get to the end and you have this character saying, you can't speak about this thing to anybody. And you see what that does to her. And look, this is not me saying that La'an is queer in any sense of the word, because she clearly was all about Kirk. But I will tell you that if you were ever a closeted queer kid who felt like they couldn't tell anybody what was going on with them emotionally, when you watch her have that conversation with Kirk and get off the phone and just break down, like it hits you. You're like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was rough. I've been there. That was that whole moment where you're like, I'm not going to tell my parents about this. I'm not going to tell my siblings about this. I'm not going to tell my friends about this. If I tell anybody this is going to be the worst thing ever. Like that one hit, you're like, oh yeah, no. Those tears, I know those tears. I remember that. Wow. And it was great. Now, what's going to be interesting is, from a nerdy time travel standpoint, La'an should never tell anybody about what happened.
Right.
Then that it stays its own story. We never have to deal with it. It doesn't fuck up with our Star Trek timeline. From an emotional character standpoint, that bitch better talk to somebody. You can't just say, La'an had the most emotionally traumatizing thing happen ever. Right. She faced her ultimate genetic demon, fell in love with somebody who accepted her, lost that person, saved the universe, but can't speak of it ever. That is not, as my therapist would say, that's not okay. You don't want to do that. So I'm going to be really intrigued to see where La'an's story goes for the rest of this season, because I want her to tell somebody. I want her to, whether it be Dr. Mabenga or Una or Pelia or, like the only person she probably really can't tell, if you're going to get really nerdy about Star Trek stuff, is you can't tell Kirk about it.
Yeah,
he can't know about Khan stuff yet. He just needs to live his life. But like everyone else, I'm like, talk to Nurse Chapel, talk to somebody.
Yeah, I agree with you. It's going to be very interesting to see where this goes and how much of that pops up. And if the Department of Temporal Investigations is actually a good department that helps things or sets things in a certain direction, because they have their agenda as well, So I'm going to be real curious to see how that plays into the overall storylines of what's going on here in this particular season.
I will tell you, after the episode was over, like actually after I had my emotional, oh, that reminds me of being gay moment. And then I was sitting there afterwards, I was thinking about it and I was like, I would work for the Department of Temporal Investigation. That's pretty cool. Yeah, man. Keep the timeline straight. Don't let everybody fuck with shit. Like, let's just keep it on. Let's not fuck. Don't go kill Hitler. Don't go.
A lot of pressure, man. There's a lot of things
Don't go make sure Eric Stoltz stayed Marty McFly in Back to the Future. Like, don't fuck with everything. Let everything. It is what it is.
Yeah. Well, no, I don't think I could handle that. I wouldn't be good at that job. I really wouldn't be good at that job. But yeah. All right. Well, let's wrap up our review here, Mike.
Well, let me ask you this. I have a question for you. You said you kicked things off. You kicked things off by saying, I think this is going to be a very controversial episode. And then we went through the entire episode and talked about how much we both liked it.
Yeah.
What do you think the other side of the reaction will be to this episode?
I think people are very sensitive about how you play with Khan. And I think, as you said, it reminded a lot of us who were watching or listening, that the reaction from a lot of Star Trek fans that they were adding a Noonien Singh to the cast character was a massive explosion on the internet in terms of the Star Trek community. There were a lot of people who were against it, didn't like it, started throwing out, well, this doesn't make sense in the chronological order of things, and how would this be possible, and why this is going to ruin Khan. So there were a lot of people that were upset about it. Me, I don't mind messing with shit. I like to mess with shit because I think it's good. It's always good to question stuff, mess with shit, and see how strong this thing actually is. So I like this episode, but I do think that there are other people who are going to be like, no, this doesn't make sense. Why would you do this? She should totally do it. So it's okay that she let all these people die. Just the Federation could have been created in a different way. And so there's going to be pushback on the episode. That is my prediction, but I hope it's muted, because this was an incredibly well-written, well-directed, well-acted, and well-constructed episode that worked in the narrow approach that they were having about two alternate timelines and trying to correct things so that they end up leading to the creation of the Federation of Planets.
It's interesting. Yeah. I'll be curious to see where it goes, because look, in this new era of Star Trek, I think that I've been a big fan. I was a fan of Star Trek Discovery from the get-go. I liked Star Trek Discovery from the get-go. I liked season 1, but it is undeniable that they made a couple choices that really kind of fucked with the timeline.
Yeah.
Like having a ship as technologically advanced as the Discovery and the whole spore drive, you're like, I'd never heard of that before. Yeah. And having a bunch of Klingons running around dressed like they were in Macbeth was also an interesting choice. So they definitely made some choices that when you tell stories that predate the stories we know, they ran into some trouble. That's why when they brought in the Enterprise at the end of season 1, all of a sudden everybody was wearing the proper Starfleet uniforms. They made a comment about the holographic technology versus talking to somebody on a screen. Like, they were doing a lot of retconning that ultimately led to them just sending the Discovery thousands of years into the future to avoid the issues that they created for themselves. So they've done that. They've gone down that road before. So now that we're in this strange new world territory, and we talked about this last week with Spock's character, like there's certain things that you're like, I don't know that this quite matches up, but if it's a really compelling story, I'm willing to put some of the character stuff aside. And as long as you don't really fuck with the bigger things. And I think because they've already made the mistake, it's not like it's the exact same team, but with Kurtzman and the team overseeing everything, like they know the mistakes they made on Discovery. So I don't think they're going to fuck with things too much. But that being said, when you've got Kirk and Spock running around in a TV show and you've thrown the name Khan around pretty liberally, like you're definitely walking a tightrope. So I agree with you. Like, I don't think that this episode in any way, shape, or form harmed the arc of Kirk and Khan and everything that we know from the movies and the original series. That being said, they're walking a line, and so far I feel like they are walking it appropriately, but we will see where they go.
Yeah. And plus, I mean, you've got a Captain Kirk in a timeline hooking up with an ancestor of Khan. So I think there's going to be issues there as well. Even though I enjoyed that, I can see people having issues with that. But overall, thought it was a fantastic episode. And I'm sure Michael agrees as well that we've been very clear about it throughout this review here. And one that I think a lot of people are going to talk about and debate and have fun discussions about for sure. And we would love to hear from you all what you think as well. All right, well, that's our spoiler review here for this particular episode. Tomorrow. Michael, what do we have to tell the people who are watching or listening to us?
Yeah, if you would like to follow us, you can do so on Twitter at geek_buddies, on Instagram at _geek_buddies. If you would like to follow Mr. Rocha, you can do it at The Rocha Says. And if you would like to follow me, you can follow me at MKToon. The other things that you can do for us is to smash that like button below, subscribe to Johnny's Outlaw Nation page, leave your comments below. What did you think of this episode? What do you think of Strange New Worlds this season 2 so far? What do you think of time travel, multidimensional storytelling? Let us know your thoughts below. If you are listening to us on a podcast, please leave us some comments and some stars so we go up in the rankings and more people can find us. And as always, the best thing you can do is retweet this video, post it on your socials, send it to your friends, and tell them to hang out with your buddies, the Geek Buddies.
There you go. All right, y'all take care of yourselves. Be well. We appreciate y'all watching or listening to this review, and we'll talk to you next time with a brand new spoiler review of Strange New Worlds here on the
Geek
Buddies.
Hey!